I'm Richard Conrath, and I'm moderating this talk by Suzanne Low. And let me briefly introduce Suzanne. Suzanne Low, our speaker today, who is talking about the national popular vote. Let's make sure the president is always the candidate who receives the most popular votes in all 50 states and the District of Columbia. Suzanne Low is Collier District Chair of Floridians for National Popular Vote, popularly known as NPV, an NPV chair and member of the board of directors of the League of Women Voters of Collier County. She has lived in Southwest Florida since 1997, serving as Director of Florida Operations and Financial Advisor for an independent wealth management firm until her retirement in 2016. Before moving to Florida, she worked as an attorney for 16 years in New Jersey. Suzanne was president of the Estate Planning Council of Naples, president of the Financial Planning Association of Southwest Florida, and charter class member of Leadership Bonita. She served as a board member of PACE at Immokalee, the Speakers Assembly of Southwest Florida, and Temple Shalom of Naples. Suzanne speaks about the national popular vote to civic leadership, adult education, and community groups. She has a BA with distinction from the University of Wisconsin at Madison, an MA from Indiana University, and her JD from Rutgers School of Law. Before I have Joanne or Suzanne continue, let me say that you can put your questions in chat or in the Q&A part of this webinar, but we'll hold off answering the questions until Suzanne has completed her presentation. So with that, let me present Suzanne Low and the national popular vote. Suzanne?
Hi, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, great. I'm very pleased to be addressing this group this afternoon on such an important day. As Richard reminded me, not only do we have the Electoral College vote, but this is also the day that the COVID-19 vaccination has started being shipped around the country. So hopefully we're on our way to a better 2021 in a lot of respects. And I'm thrilled that I looked up your organization, the Center for Critical Thinking, and I applaud your goals and mission. And I'm really pleased to be speaking to such a thoughtful group on this important topic. So I'm going to be talking about the national popular vote. And I'm here as a representative of Floridians for the National Popular Vote. The Floridians organization was created by several organizations, including the League of Women Voters of Florida and Common Cause and some other organizations that are just dedicated to this purpose, so that we could focus uninterrupted in this election year on the national popular vote, because actually the organization was created a couple of years ago. So I'm going to speak very briefly about the Electoral College. That's a very separate, important, major topic. As we said, the votes are being counted. The college is meeting state by state as we speak. And there's a lot of complexities to it. But I do need to just speak a little bit about it so that we know, in order to go forward where we want to get to, we need to come from a common base of where we are. So how does America elect our president? Well, as I'm sure everyone here knows, it's by electors, the Electoral College. And this map shows you how many Electoral College seats, votes, there are throughout the country, state by state. So we've got the most votes are 55 electoral votes in California, 38 is next in Texas. Here in Florida, where I think most of us are, it's 29. And the very smallest states by population still have 3. And the reason for that is, or the basis for that is that each state has the number of electors of your senators, and every state has 2 senators and representatives, and even the tiniest states have 1 representative. So you see a bunch of states here that are not small geographically, most of them, but they are, except for Vermont and Delaware and DC, but they're small by population. So why do we have the Electoral College? The simplest explanation is, that the Constitution of the United States calls for the Electoral College. And the salient language briefly is each state shall appoint in such manner as the legislature thereof may direct a number of electors equal to the whole number of senators and representatives to which the state may be entitled in Congress. Article 2, Section 1. That's really the story of why we have an electoral college. Now, the founding fathers, just interestingly, thought the Electoral College would be a deliberative body where people would actually get together and talk about the merits. That was at a time when there were very few people could vote. You had to be male, white, and own property. And incidentally, for many, the property besides, real property besides land were slaves, enslaved people. What happened over time, and not very much time, is that presidential electors became a rubber stamp for candidates nominated by their parties. And that really happened very early, before 1800 even. And that's pretty much the way it is today as far as the candidates are nominated or chosen by the parties. Now, the difference is that the system that we have now, which is winner take all state by state, is a result of decades of change in the 1800s. And that was driven primarily by the emergence of stronger political parties, and usually 2. And then once one state started doing, well, winner take all, not proportional, but winner take all, which is our current system, then every other state says, well, you know, if they're going to do this, we want to do it. And we want to make sure, if we're in control in our state, that none of the minority party in our state doesn't get any electoral votes. So the real problem from my standpoint as an advocate for the national popular vote is not really the Electoral College, it's the winner take all laws. The fact that in Florida and Texas, some of the states are, although they're showing red and blue here, that's not irrevocable. That just happens to be the way it is right now based on voting patterns. But our current system then is that if you're in, I'm going to make up a state, just state A, if you have 10 million votes for president, you have 5 million voted for candidate A and 4,999,999 voted for candidate B. The winner take all system says all the state's electoral votes go to candidate A. And that is really the crux of the problem. And we'll discuss this. So divergent elections, and by that we mean an election such as we had for last president, aren't just a modern phenomenon, and a divergent, in other words, a difference between the electoral votes and the popular vote. Here we had in 2016, President Trump received an overwhelming number of electoral votes, although Hillary Clinton won an overwhelming number, almost 3 million, of popular votes throughout the country. With Bush, it was much closer. And there was nothing in the 1900s. The 20th century didn't have this issue, but it happened 3 times in the 1800s. One of the most significant things for people who are living in the various states is the effect of our system on campaigning. So under the current system, I'm going to look at 2012 briefly. See these gray states with the numbers, that's where the campaign events were. That's where the candidates went to talk to the grassroots, to people, to give debates and so on. You can say, well, yeah, people can watch it on TV. Well, that's true, but that's very different than having somebody come and talk to your issues in the various states. So noticeably absent the biggest states, and we got, with our 29 votes, 40. And the state of Ohio, interestingly, this is in 2012 now, had, with their 18 electoral votes, had 73 campaign events. So this is what happens in campaigns. If we look under 2016, it's a bit different, but it's still pretty much the campaign events are concentrated in the states where the the states where the electoral votes are subject to change. In other words, what's called the battleground or swing states. And that's why they're called battleground or swing. They're not bothering with California because they know that California's electoral votes are going to go to Democrats. They don't bother to campaign in Texas because historically they've gone and they did to Republicans. And all that is reflected the same way. Why do we get all these events? Because it could go either way. It's a swing. In 2020, I updated this so it's not absolutely perfect, but I think it's right. Both presidential campaigns campaigned in just 15 states. They ignored the 35 others. Is this the way we want our country to have a president who is supposed to represent all of us? See, this is what happens with the campaigns. Then it has long-term implications because not only do we get campaign events, but the swing states receive more grants and more federal money than the others. Now you can say, well, we're in Florida, we get all this stuff because we're in a swing state. Why would I want to change it? Well, if all you care about is the state of Florida, maybe that's how you would feel. But if you're concerned about the whole country, then you take a larger view. So for example, California had devastating fires this last year. Texas had horrific hurricanes, and neither one got much help, much federal attention. So having a president elected by a minority of voters, and especially in just a few states, isn't good for the country long term, in my opinion, and the opinion of people who are supporting the national popular vote. So again, the winner-take-all laws are the heart of the problem. So how the states vote in the Electoral College, remember back to the Constitution, it's up to each state's legislatures. These laws, the state laws, with winner-take-all provisions in 48 of the states, 2 of them do it proportionally, or not proportionally, I'm sorry, by district, maybe one of them is proportional. But those laws, they're state laws, they can be changed or repealed in the same way that they were enacted, which is by their own legislature passing a different state law, and such as the national popular vote. So how should we elect our president? And we're going to talk about that in more detail. We believe, and most Americans, when they're asked, when I do this live, I have people raise their hand, and the majority, I've never been anywhere where they haven't said, well, we think, yeah, one person, one vote. Isn't that the way we should elect our president? Because the reality is we're not just red and we're not just blue. And if you call a state blue, that doesn't mean everybody there is a Democrat or everybody here is a Republican. We all know that. We have neighbors who have totally different views. We're really America the purple. I love this map. It's look nice framed on a wall. So the national popular vote law is actually an interstate compact. That's its formal name. And an interstate compact, there are many of them, hundreds, it's simply an agreement among states. Most of them deal with topics like water rights among adjoining states, but they can deal with any issue that the states have concerns about. So the National Popular Vote Interstate Compact guarantees the US presidency to the candidate who receives the most popular votes in all 50 states and DC combined instead of statewide state. It replaces the state winner-take-all laws. If you've never heard of this, it takes a little bit of time sometimes to wrap your brain around what it's saying. So it works with the Electoral College. It doesn't replace it. That's why it doesn't require a constitutional amendment, as many people seem to think. So the way it works is that this law, this interstate compact, will only take effect when states representing 270 electoral votes, and you've heard that number many times now, that's the number needed to elect a president, have passed the law. So at that time, the participating state, 270 electoral votes, there's somebody driving, and I don't know, and needs to mute. That's the number that needed to elect a president, have passed the law. So at that time, I'm sorry, the participating states will have 270 electoral votes, and they'll be cast for the candidate who wins the popular vote nationwide, all 50 states and DC combined. I know I'm repeating, but it's if it's a concept you have not come in touch with before, it takes a little bit of, like I said, wrapping your head around it. So it's the same law in all the states that pass it, and it only takes effect when enough electors and states representing sufficient electors, 270, to elect a president, have signed on to it, have passed it. So what will the national popular vote do? When effective, it will guarantee the presidency to the candidate receiving the most popular votes in all 50 states and District of Columbia combined. And every vote will count the same, regardless of where the voter lives. The way I like to explain it or describe why I care about it, whether I vote personally, me, Suzanne Low, in the state of Ohio, where I was born and lived for many years, the state of Wisconsin, where I went to college and then worked and lived for many years, the state of New Jersey, where I went to law school, and I lived in a few other states, or the state of Florida, where I have been a full-time resident for 23 years. My vote for president, the position that represents all of us, it shouldn't count differently. but it does. That's the reality. When you move around from one place to another, your vote for president is different. That doesn't make sense to me. So, in summary, the National Popular Vote Interstate Compact, it's constitutionally conservative, doesn't change the Constitution, in other words. It has to be approved by the participating states. The participating states under the Constitution have that right. It doesn't alter the Constitution. It doesn't violate the Constitution. It retains the Electoral College. It retains state control of elections. I first got involved with this through the League of Women Voters, so it has been a priority of the League. It has in the past, and it is for the coming year. And Floridians for the National Popular Vote have a goal for it to be enacted. I said in Florida, but in reality, we just want it enacted. However, it has to be done in 2024. Now, why does this have any realistic attempt? Why am I taking the time to talk about it? Because as of, it says November 1, but that's when I last revised this. As of right now, this legislation has been signed into law by governors of both parties in 15 states and the District of Columbia. That represents 196 electoral votes, which is 73% of those necessary to implement the legislation. This is what, a couple of years ago, when I saw this statistic, it was slightly less than, I said, this is not pie in the sky. This is almost 2/3 or 3/4 of the way, it's more than 2/3, almost 3/4 of the way to being passed. So let's see what we can do to help, we, me, and the organization. So again, the bill would ensure that every vote for president is equal throughout the United States, regardless of where you live, and that every vote in every state will matter in every presidential election. My sister lives in Washington State, near Seattle, and she would say, you know, by the time you'd already hear the results a few years ago, and it would be like, why am I even bothering to do this, especially in a state that, you know, we know where the Electoral College votes are going to be. And that's not fair. That's not the right way for an American citizen to have to think about their vote for president. That should be important. It shouldn't be irrelevant. So here, this is currently, these are, if you can see the dark green, these are the states and the District of Columbia that have passed it. This is the 196 electoral votes. The light green represents states where the bill has been filed in the state legislature by, in other words, somebody, you know, most of them are bicameral, like ours is in Florida, like the Congress, two houses, House and Senate. So the bill's been introduced, and there are a few gray states, gray on this map, where it hasn't been introduced. Not very many, really. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Looks like it. So what's the status in Florida? Well, National Popular Vote bills, this National Popular Vote Interstate Compact, have been filed in both the Florida House and Senate by Representative Joseph Geller, who's a Democrat, and Senator Victor Torres every year since 2017. And last week, I was in a presentation that they were in, speaking to us, to the Floridians for National Popular Vote organization. And I think Representative Geller had just introduced the bill again. in the Florida House, and Senator Torres was planning to do so in the Senate. So apparently as early as 2011, this has been filed in Florida. There have been co-sponsors, but unfortunately no Republicans to date. So now I'm going to address some of the major myths and misconceptions to flesh this out a little better as to why this will work, or answer some major objections. I'm going to go through this. Well, I guess we didn't start right on time. So the myth is only a constitutional amendment can change how we elect the president. Incorrect. Another misconception, that it would require congressional approval. Incorrect. And I'm going to go through each one of these. That big cities would control the election. That's not correct either. Small states would lose the advantage of the Electoral College. Well, in actuality, they don't have an advantage. They got 3 votes. Democrats are only doing this because of the 2016 election. This organization, the National Popular Vote, was created, not the Floridians, but in 2006, and has been active since then. Another misconception, that the founding fathers created the system because it was the most fair and we shouldn't change it. As I said before, but we'll look a little more deeply, they didn't create the system. They created the Electoral College, but not the whole system that developed. And finally, a state could leave the compact during an election. It can't. So before I go looking at these, I just want to let you know that, and I'll show you the website. I'll show you the slide for that after I get through this. But these are 7 of, hundreds of myths that are addressed in detail on nationalpopularvote.com. And I have here a 1,000-page book, Every Vote Equal, that was created by the founders in 2006. And all of that material is on their website, so you can dig into it to your heart's content. So first of all, looking at that first misconception, electing the president by national popular vote is constitutional. Why? Again, the Constitution says that the state appoints and the legislature of each state directs how the electors will vote. So it's the state legislatures that have decided how to apportion their state's electoral votes. And as we saw, 48 of those state legislatures now have said winner take all. The Supreme Court has dealt with this issue as far as the state's electoral power, and the Supreme Court says that this power is plenary or absolute. So if anybody paid attention to that case that the court refused to get involved with on Friday night, that's pretty much what they said. Well, they said something else too, because it was the state of Texas leading a group of states to try to tell states who were not part of the suit how to cast their vote, which you can imagine how well that went over, and you know if you read any of that. So it's a state-by-state decision. It doesn't require a constitutional amendment. How about congressional consent? Is that required? Well, again, the Supreme Court has dealt with this in a state lawsuit entitled U.S. Steel versus Multi-State Tax Commission. And in that case, they said that the only congressional consent is only necessary for interstate compacts that encroach upon or interfere with the just supremacy of the United States. An example of that is interstate commerce. That is something that Congress has power over. So since the choice of method of appointing presidential electors is exclusive plenary state power, there isn't any encroachment on federal authority, so there's no requirement for congressional consent. How about partisan motives? As I said, national popular vote movement started in 2006. Maryland was the first state to join by passing the law, the Interstate Compact, in 2007. Both red and blue states have enacted national popular vote. Many prominent Republicans and Democrats have signed on to national popular vote. Again, you can see that on the website. And in my opinion, and the opinion of a lot of other people who believe in this, it's not a left or right issue, it's an American issue. How about partisan results? Well, in reality, nationwide voting for president isn't advantageous to either party because politically, the US is an evenly divided country. So you say, well, how come we had 80 million votes to 72 or something? Well, it doesn't mean that they're going to vote for every office. Hopefully we haven't gotten to the point where everybody is only voting a straight ticket of whoever they're registered as. And of course, as an aside, a very large proportion of Americans and about a third of Floridians are not registered to vote as Republican or Democrat. Some are voted for some, registered for some minority parties, but many are what we call independent. Most states other than in Florida. In Florida, independent is a particular party, so we call it no party affiliation. That's another topic, but so in a recent poll, and it's not super recent now, it's a few years ago, Republican voters supported the idea by an average of 66%, Democrats by 79%. I don't want to get too into the weeds here, but generally speaking, the candidate who is best aligned with the views and the values of the country's voters at the time of the election generally wins the national popular vote. If you're interested, there is I just heard a couple weeks ago, very interesting conservative case for national popular vote by two highly recognized conservatives, self-styled, Rick Tyler and Saul Anuzis. Tyler worked on Ted Cruz's presidential campaign in 2016. And he makes the point that a larger proportion of people, including new younger voters, vote in battleground states than in states that are considered safely Democratic or Republican. In other words, people vote when they believe it matters. And others have said this before. Saul Anuzis was former chairman of the Republican National Committee and of the Michigan Republican Party, noted that a president not elected by the majority lacks a mandate to act on the goals that he or she campaigned on. This is part of the reason that they're for it. These and other Republican leaders make the argument that the national popular vote is the conservative way to change the winner-take-all laws rather than changing the Constitution. So I learned a lot from listening to these guys, and the reason I'm taking the time to pull this out is because of the accusation that has been made that this is just a liberal or Democratic ruse. So how about large cities controlling the election? Well, this was very interesting to me. The population, if you take the 5 biggest cities in the country, represents 6% of the American population. The 20 biggest cities represent 10%. Now, these are approximations. This was as a couple of years ago, but that hasn't changed drastically. If you take the 50 biggest cities in the US, that still is only 15%. And if you take the 100 biggest cities, because now you're getting into cities that even though they're biggest, they aren't big, it's only 16% of the American population. So 85% of the American population live in places with a population of less than 360,000 people. And that includes most of us in Florida, unless you're in Miami, Tampa, and a few other places. So if you look at the whole country, we got about 19% living in cities, 19% in rural areas, and the remainder in suburbs and small towns. Those of you who live in Naples or Bonita Springs, that's what we live in. We live in small towns. So by the national popular vote would make every vote equal. How about the supposed advantage of small states under winner-take-all laws? So 10 of the 13 smallest states, when we looked by population, have been totally ignored in the past 3 presidential elections. Nobody's campaigned there. Nobody's talked about their issues. Everybody knows about New Hampshire because I think they have 4 votes, because the parties have decided that the political parties have decided that they come first so that everybody can go there. And I think probably the people of New Hampshire, although they have some economic benefit from all those reporters and politicians coming in, probably are almost as sick of it as the rest of the country. The 12 smallest non-battleground states have 40 electoral votes. That's more than twice Ohio's 18. But Ohio received 73, as we saw, of the 253 general election campaign events in 2012, while the 12 small non-battleground states didn't receive any. The founding fathers creating our modern system, well, they really didn't. The winner-take-all system, they really didn't foresee it. They didn't debate it at the Constitutional Convention. It wasn't discussed in the Federalist Papers, which many of you probably know discussed everything they could think of that might happen in the new democratic republic. And it didn't become the most common system. As I said, it started early, but it didn't become the most common system among the states until long after the founding fathers had passed away. Basically, it was 1830, 1850 that it became more common. How about withdrawing from the compact? The compact's terms indicate that between July 20 of a presidential election year and January 20 of the following year, which is inauguration date, states can't withdraw from the compact. So for basically, we're talking about a 6-month period. They can't withdraw in the middle of a campaign, in other words. They can withdraw at another time, just like the legislatures can pass any laws. But legislatures don't generally move back and forth on their laws really quickly. Okay, I am ready to take questions. Richard, you probably have, I hope, a number that I'm happy to do the best that I can on. And then I want to come back if I can. Am I going to be able to come back to these slides, Richard? Okay. All right, then I'll leave it at this point. I guess I talked a little long. I'm happy to take questions as long as there are any.
We have some questions initially. I'll begin with the several that that were directed to you from the chat room. One of them by William Pope. What if a state, no, I'm sorry, you answered that one. The other question, what additional states are most likely to sign on to the compact?
That's a very good question. And let me go back to the map of, and you know, that is something that I have meant, I am guilty of. I don't have a specific answer. All of these that are in the light blue, or light green, excuse me, have had it in their legislatures at least filed, once. This has become, as you know, like everything else, super partisan, but it's also because of the chaos this year, and the fact that, I don't think there's ever been national TV coverage of an Electoral College vote. I could be wrong, but I don't recall ever seeing it. So theoretically, it can be any of these states. I am going to refer you to nationalpopularvote.com. And I don't think oops, there go my glasses. I don't think I clicked an article, although I do remember seeing it. So I'm sorry I can't be, oops. Well, I didn't break my glasses, that's good. I can't be more specific. It just depends on who files the bills in any one year. And as I said, Florida is possible, but in Florida, it's two Democrats and the Republicans control the legislature. So I will, if you want, Richard, I can take a look at that and email you, and you could share the answer
All right.
with everyone.
Thank you, Suzanne. Suzanne, just a question that's kind of related to that one. Will the compact only, does the compact only apply to those states who pass it?
Yes, yes, absolutely. You can't make, it's just like any contract. You can't make someone who's not a party to the contract abide by it. But once you get 270, that's all that's needed. And then hopefully what you would see is the other states will see, well, we're sort of not in the main party anymore. I mean, the invited to the party kind of thing, not the political party. We're not participating with everyone else, and they're more likely that once they see that there's sufficient states to have passed it to determine who the president is, they're probably going to want to get on board. And I think that's been part of the motivation. A lot of individuals and legislators are certainly subject to political persuasion. If their voters say, we think this is a good idea and we want to be part of this. But yes, that's why you have to have 270, and you're not subject to it if you don't pass it yourself as a state.
Thank you, Suzanne. I have a question here from Joan Carter. Are there plans to do more PR on this? The big city info is
okay, go ahead.
Anyone can understand, she says.
I'm sorry, would you, I interrupted you, so repeat the whole question.
Basically, are there plans to do more PR on this? And she goes on, the big cities info is shocking, and the anyone can understand. So I guess the point is,
yes, I think that's why my organization, Floridians for the National Popular Vote, and others have come together in the various states, and the states that passed it, what you had a grassroots emphasis. People came together and studied this and said, there's something we need to do. And they got together and worked very hard over the last several years to get this enacted in those states. And I signed on to this in Florida because I said, this is doable. I've gone to, myriad different presentations by legislators and by some of the grassroots people who have done this, particularly very interesting and not surprising, I guess, in the state of Massachusetts, where I heard a presentation on that. So the idea is like anything where you want to make a major change, you have to educate the populace, because the legislators basically want to make enough of us happy that we'll vote to keep them around. That's may sound cynical, but I think that's just realistic. So we are working, and part of that, my talking to you, is trying to talk to people who are interested in the issues and who are have influence in the community, if some have official influence and others simply through conversation, but groups like this, so that people can say, you know, I know this isn't true, and this is where you can go. And that's why I'm stressing, and I'll give you a slide at the end again. And I know that since this is, I was told this is recorded and will be made available on your website, the Center for Critical Thinking website, that, but there is a myriad, there is so much information on all of these on nationalpopularvote.com. And there's a whole section of, and I said hundreds, it could be more than 1,000, but it's certainly hundreds and hundreds of issues. And for example, I just did the headline on that. There is then more detail, and which might be, you know, half a page, and then you can drill down on each one of the points, the myths that I gave you, and many, many, many more, and get the ammunition and the sources. So this has been meticulously researched, and I think that's true. I mean, I was really shocked by that too. I thought that there were a lot more people in the cities, but there aren't. And of course that, you know, this changes year by year, but not drastically, at least not so far.
Thanks, Suzanne. We have a few more questions here. Let's see if we can get through them here. We have one by Bruce, and I'm going to mispronounce his last name. I know it. W-E-I-D-E. I'm going to pronounce it Weida, or if it's German, it would be Weida, I suppose. Suzanne says, I'm wondering whether the Electoral College provision in the Constitution is unique in the following respect. It is possible to effect a brilliant end run on it via the NPVIC. This is fortunate, of course, but it illuminates a loophole in the Constitution. It's a provision that can be effectively amended by agreement of far fewer than 75% of all the states. Is it actually unique in this respect, or is there another example of a constitutional provision that has been or could be amended by a similar end run?
Well, is that the, I'm sorry, was that the end?
That's the end of his question. Yes.
Okay. I would frankly dispute that it's an end run. It uses it. And an awful lot of, you could look at probably, and I mean, I don't have a direct example, but you could argue that any law that is constitutional, but makes changes or elucidates how a constitutional amendment is going to affect the particular state, you could argue that all of those are an end around. I don't see it as an end around. It is a, I mean, you could argue that winner take all laws are an end around. That wasn't contemplated by the founders. So if you're a strict constructionist, you'd say, wait a minute, that's not what they intended. It wasn't what they intended. So I don't, I mean, you're certainly entitled to your opinion that it is an end around, but I don't think that that's, I think you could say that about probably thousands of laws if you went around the country and saw, you know, how things are legislated. But I don't have a particular example on top of my head.
Sure. Well, thank you, Suzanne. I'm going to skip over Bruce's other question. Maybe we can come back to it if we have time. I have a question from Ron Muchnick. And he asks, if enough states equal 270 electoral votes to meet the NPV requirement, and I think you've already answered this, what requires the remaining states to abide by the same format? In other words, what he's asking is what is the power of the so-called compact if, as the map appears to show, there are mostly Republican states as of now. That is, I think Ron is saying that the ones who haven't joined yet are mostly Republican. What's the motivation to drop winner take all?
Well, I don't think that just because a state is Republican makes it unwilling or uninterested in changing it. In California, you could argue that because it's a blue state, they wouldn't have wanted to change it because they would have had control of their state electors totally to the Democrats. I mean, you could argue that for a lot of states. I think it's just in today's environment, particularly, well, I don't want to get involved with the political discussion right now, but it has become, it may be a little more difficult, but I don't see anything about the compact itself, about the national popular vote, that is inherently Democratic or Republican or not Republican in any particular state.
Okay.
And I've read a lot of on both sides, and I don't see it. And I don't think, you know, the Republicans that I quoted, and there are lots more, that have indicated that they're in favor of it, even though they may not be fans of has been going on in Washington or so on. They're still very much Republicans, and when I heard them speak, they consider themselves conservative, and they're for it. Michael Steele, who almost everybody who watches television news knows, he was the former Republican National Committee chair, and he's adamantly for it. And there are many others. So I don't think that being a Republican governor or Republican-led state makes them more likely not to be for the national popular vote. Sorry for that long-winded answer.
Karen Biernesser asks, can it be passed in Florida as a state constitutional amendment?
Well, if the state, could it be passed as a state constitutional amendment? Well, if the state legislature, if it were a petition and it got over 60% of the vote, this is theoretical now, and the Florida legislature could be talked into abiding by it. And for those of you who follow Florida politics, like I said, I've been here 23 years. There are so many constitutional amendments, like the one where they have to buy land, and there are just many. The legislature ignores it or builds rules around it. So where theoretically, if it would pass, yes, it might, but it requires the legislature to still pass that law. And I would not be confident, from what I know of Florida, the Florida legislature, which, you know, I came from New Jersey, and people make a lot of jokes about New Jersey, but when I lived next to a property, a piece of real property that was had a conservation easement, that meant forever. I come down here and buy a place and find out that the protected land just east of me is only protected until some developer decides they want to get the city to change it. So it's, you know, what the states do are unique to this particular state environment. That's the nicest way I have to say it.
Okay, thank you. It's, I believe, Ted Rea asked, how, this is a challenging question. I'm not sure we'll be able to get this one. How would this initiative have changed the 2016 election and Abraham Lincoln's election?
Well, the 2016 is easy. I'm sorry, was that the end of the question?
Yes.
Okay, I didn't mean to cut you off.
Oh.
2016, if you had the national popular vote, Hillary Clinton won by, I think, 2.8 million votes, something like that. So she would have been president. Lincoln, I'm sorry, I do not know how, I don't know enough about the detail. I don't know anything right now about the details, actually. I would love, that's a good question. And I will look that up for my own edification, but I don't know the answer to that.
Thank you. Seymour Birchman says, 2 states have proportional voting. How does that work here?
Well, it's possible, you know, there are lots of different possible methods. You could do it by congressional district, you could do it by county, you could do it by, you know, as many different ways as you can dream of. This particular method, number one, 73% of the votes necessary have already gone to pass this. What would happen if you did it by just the few things I mentioned? You're just adding to the levels of detail and I think potential confusion. And the effect, it would be very difficult. I couldn't even begin to predict what the effect would be, but I think it goes in the opposite direction of what we're trying to accomplish, which is simply that, you know, when you vote in Florida, the people who get the most votes in your particular district for representative, they become the representative of that district. Same thing for Senate. And I think just about every state, every office that you vote for, it's the majority of the people who are subject to that person's authority or representation. That's what happens. This is, I don't want to say anything absolute 100%, but 99%, the only position, president and vice president, that you don't have the majority of the votes determining the winner. And I think for me, it just goes against my sense of innate fairness that everybody should know that their vote matters. It doesn't matter where you live, doesn't matter what state, doesn't matter whether you're, you know, a Democrat living in a Republican area, largely Republican, or vice versa. Your vote should be your vote. One person, one vote for president. So that's our method, our message, excuse me. And if you are interested in more detail, I've mentioned this several times, just very simply, nationalpopularvote.com. And the Floridians for NPV.com also has a link to that. If you're, and you can sign on for information from either of those websites that will keep you up to date on what's going on in the news, not just in Florida, but all over the country on this topic. And if you're super interested, contact me. Richard can put you in, and I'll talk to you about volunteering if you were interested in either giving talks or, whoops, sending postcards. I just closed that inadvertently, I'm sorry. But we're trying to get people who are interested in pursuing it to get involved. So I'm happy to assist in that.
Thank you, Suzanne. I want to just share with you a couple of, we don't have time to take all the questions, it looks like. We have quite a few, but I wanted to share with you Carol Lehrer's congratulations for your talk. She gave the talk on the Electoral College. And I think she feels you've covered the subject matter in a wonderful detail. And
thank you.
Tying these two projects together. There are a couple of other questions I'll I'll see if we can handle some of them.
I'll hang on for, however long. We're losing some people, but we still have people. So
Man,
I'll stay.
good number.
Just have to drink a little more water.
Judith, I think is a Vester is her name. Can you discuss the impact of ALEC on this issue? Now, I'm not familiar with ALEC.
You're talking about the organization.
The LEC.
I'm trying to remember what it stands for. They're one of their officers had written a very favorable article, editorial maybe a couple of years ago, and it's a as I recall, it's a conservative. Mm-hmm. In fact, the C might stand for conservative, but I can't remember.
Okay.
So I think that the more I try to listen to things that I can learn something from, and particularly I was interested in, as I said, the people who call themselves conservative and who have been active in Republican circles and/or to see what makes it appeal to them. The fundamental fairness, I think, is the thing that brings us, regardless of your political view, just that, it's not fair that people on the West Coast should be hearing what's happening and feel like it's irrelevant, their vote's irrelevant, or that people in battleground states, I mean, regardless of where you live, if you've got hurricanes or floods or burning forests, the president, the administration shouldn't be able to say, well, we're not going to give you as much because you're a Democratic state or you're a Republican state. Frankly, I find that contemptible, but anyway.
All right, thanks, Suzanne. Mark Albrecht asks a challenging question. Has someone calculated how closely this version of national popular vote by electors will approximate the actual popular vote?
Well, if it works, it will exactly represent the popular vote. In other words, if the popular vote is, the national popular vote is, however, like we've got 80 million to 74 million, whatever it was, it will go to the person who has 80 million. If it's 75 and 74, it'll go to the 75. So yeah, that's the whole point, is that it is exactly reflective of the national popular vote. Okay. Am I getting that question correctly?
Yeah, I think okay. So. Thank you. And Alan Van.
Because the states will still be running the elections. You'll still have all those secretaries of state or whoever is running the elections in any state, and it's all different, because we give it state by state. So all those people are still, that's not going to change. The only thing that's going to change is who the electors vote for.
Okay, thank you. Suzanne, Alan Van Egmond asks a question here. Will the battleground states likely oppose the national popular vote initiative, such as our state, because of concerns that votes in the Electoral College will be hollow?
Will be hollow?
Hollow, yes. I think he's thinking that they wouldn't really count. I think maybe you answered that earlier by saying that only the states who are, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, it's, they count, they're just going to count, instead of counting for the state, they'll count for the national. Now, will some states say, oh, we're getting all this attention? Maybe, but, I think that I haven't heard that very much, because a lot of the attention is really unwanted. Now, there are some things, like there are people who, for example, don't want offshore drilling in Florida, and I happen to be one, but there are people of all political persuasions who don't want it because it's in our backyard. Well, guess what? We don't have it, and it wasn't discussed because it was convenient for the administration in office to appease the ruling members of the party, of his party, by not bringing it up. So yeah, I mean, I'm not saying that anything is 100%. It's not like this system is garbage and the other one's perfect, but it's a lot fairer. And I think in the long run, it will make sure that you don't have a sense that the president doesn't represent me by as many people. Of course, we're in such a partisan and you know, I don't know what you call it, Alice in Wonderland world right now, that it's going to take a while to get things to normal, I think.
I think we might have time for one more question.
Okay.
Suzanne, Paul
Sure.
Carson asks, again, another very good question. What are the next steps? I think you kind of answered that somewhat.
Yeah, I unfortunately inadvertently closed my presentation. But the next steps, let's see if I can get this back up. Well, no, well, maybe it's still, is it still there? Because it still says it's sharing, but I think you're looking at my picture of Greece right now.
I think
what you're seeing.
Yes.
Yeah. The next two, let's see, the slide at the end, you're not going to have the PowerPoint presentation on there. Basically, Paul, who I know well through the League of Women Voters, as you know, I am chair not only of the district chair of Floridians for National Popular Vote, but chair for the League of the National Popular Vote Committee. And we are we're going to be doing, contacting legislators, sending postcards, all kinds of things. We are hamstrung to a certain degree this year because of COVID-19. We're not going to get, have personal conversations, but we can have them by Zoom. And an awful lot of what people can do is get themselves educated. I learned about this topic. I first heard about it not more than 3 years ago. It may not have even been quite 3. And it caught my attention. I said, this sounds really interesting. And I went on that website. You can get incredibly educated on this whole thing. And you can spend hours and hours learning new materials on nationalpopularvote.com. And the Floridians for NPVIC.com website will specifically let you sign up for more information, to volunteer, and so on. And here in Collier County and Lee, I actually live in Bonita Springs, but my official title is for Collier. We've got a lot of educating to do. And the more people talk about this to family, friends, and so on, and the more you educate yourself about, like when somebody says something, like I just gave you an illustration with those several myths, but the more people say something, you say, you know what, I'm going to look that up, or you can look that up, and then get back to you. And then you have the ammunition, because it's it's not an easy topic. That was one of the reasons I got involved, in retirement. You don't want to let your mind go. That's why I stay on boards and do this. And I have a law degree. I practice law, so I understand the interaction of some of these things. So I thought, this is something I could help with. So there's a huge amount of material, and get comfortable enough that you feel you can do something. And anybody can write postcards. We're just talking right now about how we're going to do that, because in the past, sending postcards to legislators and even the public, people have gotten together in the little parties and stuff, and we're certainly not doing that in the era of COVID-19, which hopefully won't go on forever. But then I'm sure you're all following who's going to get the vaccine and is it going to stay in the developed world, which means it won't help, and all the arguments pro and con. And there's still a large percentage of people that aren't going to get it. Well, Paul knows more about this than I do since he's a physician. So get educated, get and sign up for these newsletters, sign up for these alerts. There is a wealth of information, and I hope some of you at least will find it as fascinating a topic as I do. Richard did, he heard me before, and I was thrilled that he thought it was a important enough topic to bring to this group. And so I've talked to some, 55 of you, 56, I guess, at some point, and talk to your friends and family, sign up for news alerts, contact me.
Thank you, Suzanne. And I want to thank you first for this wonderful presentation. And you had a number of people in the chat room on questions and answers who wanted to let you know that they really enjoyed this presentation so much. Yes, you're right. I've heard this the second time now, and I learned more even this time. You know, maybe third time's a charm. I don't know.
Yeah, you signed me up for another group yet.
Yes, I know. We'd love to. We're very fortunate to have had someone with your credentials, Suzanne, to be able to bring this very important initiative to us, and one who is also in a leadership position for this very initiative. I also want to thank our technical support folks, Amy and Maria, who's always there to help. And I want to thank CCT and Bill Pope, the president, for bringing this presentation to us. So with that, Suzanne, thank you so much.
It's been a pleasure.
On an important day when the electors are meeting and when the vaccines are being distributed.
Right. And I'm not going to wait for the last one before I have a glass of wine, but I may sit and watch them at the end of it.
And thanks to all of you who signed on today. We really appreciate it. All the best and happy holidays.
Yes. Happy holidays to you all. Thank you.